Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to the first episode of our webinar series with kBridge. Today, we'll be discussing the many ways kBridge can help engineer-to-order manufacturers streamline sales processes with engaging 3D visualization tools that empower users to provide enhanced experiences for internal sales, channel partners, and end consumers alike. My name is Holland Dotts, and I'm a senior consultant here at Mountain Point, where we specialize in making it easier to do business for manufacturers, especially in the ETO space. My co-host today is Chris DiEllo, Vice President of Business Development at Engineering Intent, the maker of kBridge. Chris and I created this webinar to share how kBridge can be a game changer for manufacturing companies selling complex, highly configurable products.
Good stuff. Thank you, Holland. And thank you, everybody who's here with us. Welcome to all of you. For those of you who don't know me, I have over 30 years experience in the engineer to order product and company space, including having worked as an engineer for manufacturing companies in sheet metal and plastics, having done some engineering automation, leveraging CAD and CAM technologies, and then in the technology space as well, configure, price, quote, and automation related to design and drawings and documents and so on. So like I said, excited to get going today. So where we're going to start is looking at the challenges we've seen ETO companies having that really prevent them from scaling. We'll then get into some of the features or capabilities of kBridge that enable those types of companies to scale. We'll go through 3 different use cases, as Holland referenced: inside sales, end consumers, and channel sales, partners, dealers, that kind of use case. And then we'll wrap with a question and answer session at the end. So I'll ask that you all put your questions into the chat, and we have allocated time at the end of the session to go through those and get them answered. So without further ado, what challenges have we seen most often related to engineer to order companies scaling? The first is manual processes. And I'm suspecting one to many of these all will resonate. But manual process, just traditionally, companies, ETO companies, will throw people at a problem or at a process. Just increase the number of people, and hopefully that will address the process in a shorter time frame. In general, that's not scalable, and also doesn't resolve any errors or inconsistencies and so on. Similar in nature, and again, all these pieces end up being interwoven, but similar in nature, we'll find that there's a reliance on subject matter experts. So people that have a deep experience, deep product knowledge are brought into the process that isn't related to product development or isn't related to delivery for a customer and so on. So they're brought into the sales process or supporting a sales channel or customer success, something like that. And ultimately, that doesn't allow for scale. It doesn't allow someone without that product knowledge to do their job more efficiently and more accurately. There's also this notion of what I'll call resource priority. So paramount to an ETO company's business is ultimately generating revenue by delivering a product to their customer. Well, to deliver that product, you need to go through the process of manufacturing and engineering it, and ultimately to provide the right specs and whatnot on that, you need to actually sit with the customer and learn what they need. That's great. It's all necessarily part of the process, but it doesn't allow any time to go through the process of improving what that time frame looks like or automating the process that they have. Then there's also this idea that I'll call internal perception, which many times this is just, well, the product we make is highly engineered. It's extremely complex. We just have no choice but to have human intervention. We have no choice but to get our subject matter experts involved in the pre-sales process to educate our customers and to learn what their requirements are. And again, it's because of that, perhaps in some cases, not inaccurate perception, but that perception itself ends up being a hurdle or a hindrance to that company trying to scale or expand or put automation to things. And then finally, not that it applies to all manufacturers in the engineer to order space, but for many, there's just no ability for a customer to self-serve. And that means there's largely a channel of revenue, incremental revenue, that is being missed. So what can kBridge bring to the table to hopefully help with all this? The first is really encapsulating rules within the system. And those advanced rules and calculations can be captured through the authoring environment within kBridge. But then as an end user, I'm guided through the process. I can't pick incompatible options. I can't define something beyond its permissible bounds. Next is actually object relations and even this idea of nested or macro versus micro configurations. So the idea there is that maybe I have an overall solution. Each of the objects or pieces of the solution need to interact with one another, but each of them are in fact configurable either in and of themselves or with respect to the entire system. So those are things that need to be considered. Then a 3D scene. So that's what we're going to get into depth today, is around that visual configuration. So having that 3D scene, having an immersive environment, making sure that whomever the user is, they can actually see the context of the solution within an environment. And just as importantly, they can quote that accurately, they can share what a result from that might look like. And finally, the actual interoperability of the user interface within kBridge when defining that 3D scene, for example. There's this idea of drag and drop and snap in place. We call it snap drag, but really getting objects that are able to connect with one another and then actually building out an entire solution in a visual manner so that I can go through the process of accurately quoting or ultimately purchasing the solution. So with all that, let's get into the different use cases that we have here.
All right. So for our first use case, we're going to look at inside sales. Now, if I put on my inside sales rep cap, my top priority is going to be independence. I want to be able to complete a quote on my own. I don't want to just start a quote and send it off to an engineer, send it off for approval, and have to wait hours or even days before I get that back and I can share that with the customer. So in order to have that independence, I want an intuitive guided process to be able to create that quote on my own. Also really want to have confidence in the accuracy of that quote, both with relation to pricing and also the configuration of the product. So I want to make sure I'm quoting something that's actually manufacturable that can be provided to the customer.
Spot on. Yeah. No, well said, Holland. Yeah. So in the example that we're going to start with here, the primary goal is to generate an accurate quote quickly and easily. And reality is that we could go through what we're going to go through in a more deliberate manner because we're going to talk through it. We could go through it more quickly, configure, drawing, actual quote document. But you'll get the sense of how, as a non-subject matter expert, I can get there. So as we're going through this configuration process, you're going to see a number of things. The ability really to manipulate the visual scene, the 3D model in this case on the right-hand side, and make changes and take in and understand the impact of those changes we're making. Paramount to this, of course, if we're creating a quote, is the updating of the price itself. For this example, that price is shown on screen here. And you'll note that although we won't call it out every change we make, you'll note that that does update as we do go through these changes. A key aspect of visual configuration is really removing ambiguity as well as enabling certainty. So as I make a change, there's no hidden meaning of what that change is. Or as I choose an option or explain an operating condition, I can see the impact or understand that the impact is being considered in the background. So in this case, with this 3D framed house, I can look at it from many different perspectives. I can start to get the aspect ratio of the length versus width. I can go through the process of understanding either aesthetically or structurally how it's built. I can consider the position of doors and windows or the number of windows and so forth. There are also rules here that guide us through the process. Some are simple in nature that when I change the value of the length or width, the model itself updates. We'll see in a moment that the drawing behind the scenes is also updating. There are other rules that keep me from building something that is, as Holland talked about, either not manufacturable or not allowed in certain conditions. So an example rule here is where the width of the house is not able to be this equal to or greater than the length of the house. You'll notice that there's actually a red highlight around the field of the width that is shown to the user as an alert, and the tooltip changes as well to let the user know that what that rule is, that it can't be greater or equal to the width or the length rather of the house. So once I resolve those issues, then that alert goes away and I can move forward with the design and make other changes. Something unique and key to speed and ease with kBridge is the native 3D model that exists within kBridge and its associated drawing. This is huge. So if you consider that I no longer as a salesperson need to rely on an engineering team to generate a drawing in support of my quote, in fact, I can be doing this all on my own independently, as Holland talked about, and the drawing is updating. That's inclusive of drawing dimensions, drawing views, bills of materials. It might be the scale of the drawing. All those things are very impactful. And again, while we won't highlight it each time, as we make changes to the input, it's on the left-hand side of the screen in this case, and you'll see the drawing update on the right-hand side. Well, of course, the model is still updating as well, but the bill of material is expanding appropriately depending upon the changes. So the power there is absolutely huge for an inside salesperson, just to alleviate the engineering support that might be required. But also, I don't even know how to spell CAD, and I'm able to use the system, and that just becomes powerful for me to do my job and get done what I need to get done. So we've changed the shape here of the structure itself. If we go back to the 3D model here, you'll see those changes accordingly. And this gives us a few more options or a few more perspectives to see how visual configuration can be just leveraged. So looking at things, I get a sense of what this looks like from either a plan view or different perspectives through rotation. I can see that a gable end or gable style roof is different than a hip style roof. I can then understand perhaps where, from a size perspective, not only will this literally fit on my property, let's say, and you're going to see that example in a little bit, but also the aesthetic. What if I like a steeper pitched roof because it just looks better to me? Or maybe I'm in a location that has heavier snowfall or ice and snow like Scott's driveway has. How do we handle that? And how can the structure handle it as well? But there are rules, not just the, hey, you can't do this rule, but rules that lurk behind the scenes. So whether I choose through my region of a country or the actual snow load, in this case, the rafters are becoming more dense to structurally support a heavier load of snow. That's not something as a salesperson I would know to do, but not only does it do that from a design perspective, the bill of material updates, the price updates, the drawing updates, all in real time. Again, very powerful for me. So let's kind of dial this back into what I'll call a simpler, maybe not quite a tiny home, but a simpler structure that we're going to do. And we've been really looking at things kind of under the covers, the frame of the house. So in this example, we can also apply some sheathing to the roof as well as the walls. And there are just a few different options here that we can go through for colors and different styles of that. And we can even, rather than having our house kind of be floating in space, anchor that to by visualizing on ground. So again, it just provides a different perspective and scale and gives better sense of what we're configuring in the solution ultimately that we're going to drive toward. Before we maybe jump over to actually building the quote, let's add a door to this house. And the first way, we'll do it in two different ways. The first way that we'll add the door is through something we call snap drag. And this is where the door, based upon these yellow and gold diamonds, can lock into different sockets that are the allowable positions for this door. So in this scenario, the manufacturer said, hey, you can't just put the door anywhere. It's allowed only in these spaces. Granted, in any one of those spaces, the door can be dropped. Since it is allowable, then all the framing members around the door get re-engineered, recalculated, and shown appropriately. There's an alternative method which allows for far more arbitrary placement. So again, up to the ETO company that might be doing this, same framed wall that we're looking at. Now I can actually say that I want to add a door, and I can grab that door via my mouse and move it to really any position within the framed wall. So I'm not regulated to just those 24-inch or 48-inch increments or whatever those are. It's really any arbitrary location. Likewise, I can add windows, resize those windows, and position them as well. So these are just two examples of the kind of visual configuration that isn't necessarily the size and shape of an overall, what I'd call a macro configuration. This is more of that micro configuration, even a nested configuration of a feature or an object within an overall solution. We're looking at this in just 2 dimensions here, but it is also still that 3-dimensional object. There's still a drawing that's being updated behind the scenes in real time. And so there is just another way, again, that provides more flexibility if the manufacturer chooses to allow for that user to have flexibility in this way. So let's put a bow on this use case by creating a quote. And in doing so, we'll jump back into the UI that has the house framed, select on the quote button, and really this output document isn't limited to quote, could be a specification, could be whatever that, I'll call it custom brochure ends up being, where there are not just merely images of the configured solution, but perhaps drawings, perhaps dynamic text to verbally describe the solution, a bill of material, of course, the important price piece of it, because it is a quote. Really, the goal, as we talked about, was allowing an inside salesperson to quickly and easily generate an accurate quote. And you can see that we can create this very comprehensive professional output document through that visual configuration process.
All right, great. On to our second use case. We're going to look at the end consumer. So if I'm an end customer, end consumer, my priorities change. My top priority now is low complexity. I really want ease of use. So I want to be able to see the product in high quality images, and I want to be able to easily navigate and explore all the customization options. Preferably see it within different contextual scenes, but just explore, try it before I buy it digitally, essentially.
Yeah, good explanation, Holland. I appreciate you actually putting the use case priorities there. I'll kind of flip that on its head for a minute before getting into the actual use case, and that is looking at this use case from the manufacturer's perspective. So if I'm a manufacturer, I would want this kind of use case. My goal would be to, at a minimum, generate leads and ideally increase incremental revenue just by driving sales through a channel which is this end consumer channel that perhaps I'm not getting from any other way without doing this. And I guess bear in mind that end consumer self-service doesn't necessarily equate to buying online or purchasing online or an e-commerce experience. It certainly could, but it could be more of a, hey, request a quote or find a dealer. So those are more of those lead generation type of scenarios. And when we say self-serve, I guess anytime that we see manufacturing companies, it doesn't fit for all manufacturing companies to do this, but there's a significant competitive advantage when a customer or a company rather allows their customers to go through this process. So as we look at this second example here, and we consider this playground that's been set up, And it addresses all the things that Holland talked about. It's a simpler user experience. It's actually a pre-configured solution where there is a fair amount of variability allowed through the panel on the left-hand side there to personalize or customize the playground. And it's that personalization that, from our experience, it makes a customer really emotionally tied with what they're building in terms of a solution. And so it's that attachment, it's that investment that they have in building that solution that increases their propensity to buy. So I mentioned before about kind of this idea of macro and micro. So we have this pre-configured playground. There are a number of different themes, if that's the term we're using here, that change aspects of this, be it colors or roof styles or material styles. And all the way as we go through those themes, Holland is using this aspect of visualization to zoom in and rotate and get different perspectives on this. We can also change colors. So within each theme, there's a general color palette, but then we go into the micro aspect or the nested configuration piece, which allows us to change configuration options, in this case, color, in a more granular manner. So there might be our school mascot, or our school has this colors and we want to match that. Or, you know what, we're going to be putting this piece of playground equipment next to some existing pieces of playground equipment, and we need to match those. We need to have complementary colors. And so as we go through these different scenarios, it really allows us to see those in better light, more clearly. We're digitally trying it before we buy it, and even down to the point where we can begin to replace components. So in the case of the bridge that we have here, we can replace that with more of a climber bridge and even a crawl through tunnel. So now again, depending upon the use case here, if this is an end user, we might not want to allow the variability or the flexibility that ultimately the manufacturer would have. But if the goal here is to really just generate that lead or create interest or have that emotional tie, then this is a great way to accomplish that. To further accomplish that, we can then add an environment around this. So this allows really to get true to life perspective on where the playground might sit. And think of this as almost a snow globe, where in 360 degrees, I can see the playground. It gives me scale. It gives me context of where it is. Furthermore, I can add in augmentation items. In this case, we're adding in a plant, a tree, and we can add in people, a mother and child for perspective, and a bench and so forth. We can see this with or without the play surface that's been defined here. So all these aspects really allow that true to life sense of getting context of what a configured solution looks like to me, allows me to personalize that as an end consumer, and then ultimately either purchase or at least raise my hand and say, hey, I want to learn more. I want to quote.
All right. Well, for our last use case, we're going to look at channel sales. So if I'm a distributor, I think the aesthetics are less important to me. The anytime access is very important, but I think more importantly is the flexibility. So I want to be able to put together a wide variety of configurations to accommodate any what if scenario that the end customer might present to me. I also want to have various output options available so I can share that with the customer, whether that's drawings or 3D models or whatever that is. I want to be able to have all my options, so whatever's going to help drive sales the most is available to me.
Yeah, well said, Holland, as always. So again, I'll do the same thing here and show the other side of the coin, so to speak. So those are the priorities for the end user as a channel sales, a dealer, distributor, partner, manufacturer's rep, whatever you want to call those people. But from the manufacturer's perspective, there's a competitive advantage here because it builds dealer loyalty. And how it does that is by really enabling or empowering the dealer through the tool that's available to them to go and actually configure something on their own, quote something on their own without the support of the sales team or some product expert at the manufacturer. So that competitive advantage is incredibly important. So I guess from there, this example is really project based. Pardon me. So you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner, there are 3 tabs for this tailored user interface, the way this wanted to be set up. The first encompasses really job information. That could be the job, the project that I'm doing. It could talk about the quote that I'm actually building, the company for whom I work as a dealer. Maybe it's also the client to whom I'm actually proposing the solution, and even cost, which might be beyond just the price of what it's going to be, the materials, but it might include also things like freight or margins or installation, things of that nature. In this case, rather than starting with a pre-configured playground, we're actually going to build one more or less from scratch by assembling components. And rather than starting with a predefined play surface, we're going to import an image of a Google map of an elementary school. And the idea around this is that we can actually sketch or put the play surface space in the right spot and to scale within this mapped area. Now, consider this map could also be a site plan for a particular area where there is a drainage system going, or it might be the floor plan within a distribution center where we're going to actually configure an entire conveyor layout. The first step after we upload it is to actually scale the image itself. In this case, we measured the distance between a parking spot and said, doink, okay, now we have the scale for the image. From there, another incredibly unique aspect of visual configuration that kBridge offers is the ability to then sketch a boundary. And that boundary can say, okay, we need to keep things contained within this area. We've located a spot on the grounds of this elementary school where we're going to go ahead and kind of rubber band around and sketch this boundary. That will then define our play surface, or what is also known as a safety surface. We can turn off the uploaded image just for clarity so we can focus to the safety surface, and then begin assembling the playground components. For this product, those components typically start with a tower. So we'll go ahead and assemble that in. We get the opportunity to configure that tower in and of itself. We'll accept the defaults for right now. And just like with the other examples you saw, we can reposition things, we can zoom in, we can get a better perspective, better understanding of what we're going to go ahead and do and how we're going to make changes to this. From the palette on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll notice that we can drag other pieces of equipment and then they snap into place, very similar to how the door snapped along that front wall. As Holland snapped this slide into place, you'll notice that 2 things happened. First, the railing that was on 4 sides of the tower changed on the slide side of the tower so that the slide is accessible from the tower. And secondarily, we see this visual alert because the defined calculated safety boundary around the slide exceeds or is outside of the playground boundary. So to rectify to that violation, we're going to go ahead and move the tower to a different position. That safety boundary for the slide is inside the play boundary. We're good. We've resolved that violation and we can move forward. We'll go next by assembling a climber into a different side of the tower. And that component shows up as red, so we understand that there is a height issue we need to address. To address that, we can right-click on the tower and bring up that modal dialog that allows us to configure the tower. We'll make it taller, and really 3 things happen, as subtle as they might seem. The first thing that happened was that the ladder, the climber, is no longer red, so that issue has been resolved. The second thing is because the tower is higher, we now have a larger or taller slide to accommodate that higher tower, And that slide is longer, so its safety barrier exceeds the playground barrier. So we need to actually then reposition the tower, which will move the slide and climber with it to clear that violation of the safety piece that we have. And then the third thing that actually happens is the railing that was on three sides of the tower changes. Now it's shown only really on two sides of the tower, just because there are no other pieces of equipment there it needs, but it's gone to a slatted railing. Doesn't have the open area that the metal rung railing had before. That's, again, a safety thing. So as a extended sales channel person, I don't know anything about the safety rules of a playground, perhaps, but I do know that as I snap these pieces together, this configuration is either alerting me or fixing itself to ensure that I abide by whatever safety code or regulations there are. We can add in other components. Let's go ahead and add in a bridge. In this case, it's a slatted kind of swinging bridge there. And this is a good time at any time to, again, visual configuration. You just want to zoom in and inspect things and how they maybe connect and look at things more easily, just to understand what they look like and just get a better sense of the solution you're building. We can snap another tower to the solution here, because the bridge is kind of just hanging in midair at the moment. So we'll do that. And you notice, again, this tower comes in. We didn't have to configure it all. It knew, based upon its height, that it needed to have these slatted fence type railings. We'll add in a slide here. That side of the tower updates to accommodate for the slide. We can then also realize that we don't really have any access to this slide unless we climb up the other tower. So let's add a ladder to this second tower so we can access that slide more easily. And at this point, really, it comes down to what other changes do we want to make. And so before we get to the outputs of things and so on, we can do a number of things here. We can inspect this just by rotating, panning and zooming through our mouse mechanisms that Holland has done here. We can also go through the process of using the cube that's in the upper right-hand side of kBridge that allows us to manipulate the model itself. You notice that this model actually has some footing elements beneath the playground safety surface. So again, something maybe you wouldn't show an end consumer, but the person who's installing this or a dealer would understand what those pieces are. In addition, one of the things Holland talked about was what if scenarios. So it's a great way if, as a dealer, manufacturer's rep, I'm sitting next to a customer, I'm walking them through this configuration. We're looking at it from different perspectives. We're realizing we've configured it in the context of their school grounds, let's say, so we know it's going to fit. Now maybe I want to visualize some different colors or themes. Again, perhaps I am actually trying to match something that's on the school grounds, or maybe I have school colors or a mascot to which I'm trying to meet up. So there are a number of different things that I can accomplish here, and certainly these examples are just a few. Yeah, good stuff. Never get tired of looking at 3D stuff. So from here, let's I guess maybe we'll talk through the outputs. Good thing I forgot to do. Thank you, Holland, for reminding me here. So we talked about the visual alerts that existed within the safety boundaries of things like the slide or the tower or whatever that is. These are not visual alerts. We've deliberately turned these on. It could be that through the process of getting approval from the municipality, from building inspectors, some code regulation people, we need to show where these safety boundaries are with respect to the play space boundaries. So we can turn these on, actually apply dimensions to them on a drawing if that's appropriate, and just really allows us to again, further visualize the solution we've created and to make sure it's adhering to whatever codes or rules that exist. So getting ahead of myself now, let's get on to the output. So number of different outputs here could be bills of materials and different variation level of detail of those bills of materials. Might be documents that get generated, different views of the quote with more or less information, kind of a summary quote versus a detailed quote. may even be CAD files that can be given to downstream manufacturing people internally that they need to be generated, or maybe you actually want to be able to give this off to a customer for whatever reason. And then another output here that we're going to focus on for a minute is a QR code. This becomes very powerful. If you think about a QR code, whether it's on screen or it's within a document, I can actually read that with my mobile device and then go through the process of actually sharing that. Whomever has the QR code can do what Holland has just done here, and that is read it with his mobile device and actually go through the process of inspecting through, rotation and zoom in and zoom out and looking at whatever solution has been configured. So again, this isn't necessarily the visual configuration piece of it, but as a byproduct or as an output of the visual configuration, you get this visual that ends up being incredibly impactful, whether it be just because it's cool sales candy, so to speak, or it allows, in the case of the elementary school, it allows the superintendent to pass that around to teachers, or to get people excited, increase enthusiasm, or to get a board to approve something more readily because they can actually, digitally see it. So all that stuff being said, what did we learn today so far? Really, I'll call it three things. The way ETO manufacturers can leverage kBridge. The first is really by creating custom tailored solutions to enhance the user experience and efficiency of those users across many different audiences. The second is having defined rules and configuration logic that ensure only manufacturable options can be selected. As crazy as that might sound, people sometimes try to sell things you can't make. So let's put some guide rails around it and make sure that that can be done. And then finally, really providing this engaging, user-friendly, immersive application and tool that makes it easier and faster for companies to do business with you. And customers to do business with custom manufacturers. So yeah, I've been talking a lot here, Holland. So maybe we move in to see if there are any questions from the audience here.
All right. Great job, Chris. I'm not sure if it's the view that I'm looking at this. I'm not finding the chat. Maybe I need to quit sharing.
It's all right. Yeah, I see the chat, and we must have been incredibly good at explaining things because nobody has any questions.
Great job, guys. That was an excellent overview.
I agree. That was great. I think people are going to have questions, but they may have to think about it a little bit. So,
yeah, totally fair, and certainly that Holland and I can get the recording or link to the recording out as it makes sense to folks, and happy to answer any questions, be it here or later on. And yeah, I guess.
so we do have one question here.
Oh,
Great.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, so kBridge almost always fits into an enterprise. It's not hardly ever used as a standalone system. And because of that, from day one, we've built APIs, we've built various ways to have it fit. One of the biggest pieces of that is our REST API. So you can call kBridge through the REST API. kBridge can make REST API calls to other systems. And so we often use that. Another element of that is our out-of-the-box integrations, of which there are many, with the various CAD systems, SolidWorks, Inventor, AutoCAD, Revit, Creo, etc. And then we have Excel and Word integrations and PDF and SQL Server integration. So we have a lot of ways to talk to other systems and to get information from other systems. And often that ends up being unique to each customer. It's not a cookie cutter thing. And For example, we integrate with multiple different ERP systems, but we've never created out-of-the-box ERP integrations, primarily because everybody's use is a little bit different, and it just hasn't been a common, enough of a common theme to justify an out-of-the-box integration. Yeah, no, great question, and really important question for the success of these kinds of applications in any company.
Yeah, all true, Scott. And Matthew, great to see you, and God bless you for being up this early in your world. And not to tease you with this, but the next webinar that we're planning to do next month is where Holland and I, and likely at least one other partner, will be talking through the different ways that kBridge can fit into these different enterprise applications, just as Scott talked about. So appreciate your recognition of that being important, and that's next up on our docket to cover within this webinar series.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
By chance? I haven't seen anything else come through on the chat, but if we're all set, we can wrap it up. Thanks, Scott, for spoiling the slide. No, I'm just kidding. We will be diving more deeply into that. So everybody who's attended this one or registered for this one, in any case, will get the invite for that. So we'll be looking more closely at those enterprise application integrations on the next episode. And thanks so much for everybody who joined us. We appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you on the next round.
Thanks all.
Good job, guys.
Take
Great
care.
job.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.